everybody, and welcome to another episode of Spotlight on CS Ops, where we get to talk to the folks that make operations happen in the customer success space. I am Matthew Lind from Austin, Texas, and John Naran, my co-host,
Hey, Matthew.
coming to us from the West Coast. And so I think we're going to go coast to coast on this one because with us today, we're pleased to have Jen Provenzano here, who is a senior technical program manager at Deal and New York. If my research is good, yes.
Yes, in New York, but in Troy, New York, upstate. So not quite New York City, like 2.5 hours north of there.
Yeah, there is a New York beyond the city, right?
Right.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we're so pleased to have you with us. Now, I did sort of enunciate your title there because I wanted to get it right. So, why don't you unpack that with us? A senior technical program manager could be a lot of things. What does it mean for you?
Yeah, that is a really great question. And 2 months or so into my tenure with Deal, I'm still trying to figure that out. But so far, what it's looked like is kind of being the internal tools product manager for our Gainsight instance predominantly. So I am kind of an admin of the system. I'm also responsible for the roadmap, all the projects, working really closely with, we have a customer success operations team that is separate from my team. I roll into the go-to-market process and systems team, which is made up of systems administrators and analysts, developers, and then this technical program manager branch that is responsible for like helping bridge the gap between our operations team and their strategy and building things in our systems with the technical admins, analysts, and developers.
That's very cool. I've seen a lot of companies now, they're starting to break out like business systems from operations and or sometimes even more functions. But you must work like you must have some counterpart in CS ops then that you work quite closely together and tightly together. How do you guys sort of manage your work or how do you work together?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I've done roles at companies where maybe the operations function's a little bit less robust, a little bit like newer, less built out. And I've been like the only CS ops manager doing the process, the systems, etc. And at this company, like you said, it's definitely broken out and siloed. We're actually the systems team is pretty new at Deal, with proper structure and people to take on each of those separate roles, which is really exciting. And it's a great time for me to join in this capacity. But we kind of divide the work, where anything that strategically needs to be changed for customer success, the CS operations team evaluates it. They come up with a process or a plan to change whatever that process is or create a new process. And then we partner really closely in prioritizing how we build that in the system, exploring different options. As you both are well aware, there's never one way to get from point A to point B. There's always like 10 of them. So we evaluate some of those options together, and then the build is all me and my team.
I realize you're just a couple months in at this, but how have you managed to not step on the toes of your counterparts in the operations team? Are they on you? Like how are you finding ways to operate together where you're not in each other's business to a unproductive degree?
That's a really excellent question as well, because specifically at Deal has grown very rapidly. The company's only been around for about 5 years and has about 3,600 employees. So grown pretty rapidly. And so some of the folks who are on the team have been here 3 years and have worn a lot of hats, but now we're getting more specialized. So my primary counterpart in CS operations, she is one of those people who's more tenured with the company, and she's done the systems side of it as well as the operations side of it. So she does have a lot of autonomy and folks on her team as well to get into the system and administer certain parts that they're comfortable with. But once it gets to be a cross systems architecture issue or something that's a little bit more complex in the build, they will loop us in and say, hey, I don't know how to do this, or I'm not sure if I'll break something doing this, so please help us out with this.
And when you look at the org structure, like, so you sit under, is it like, so you said processes and business systems.
Mhm.
Is it, what kind of leader sits above that? Is it an operations leader, or is it like an IT or business systems?
So at the very top of our org, we do roll into the chief operating officer. We do have a couple additional layers of operations leaders in our world. I think expansion operations is the broader bucket that we sit within, and customer success operations rolls into the same leader as my leader in the systems and process world.
That's interesting. You're able to at least like collaborate on goals, and you're not, you don't have two different parents. So that's, it must make it a little bit easier that you're at least, you got the same parent, and so you can probably align a little bit better.
Yeah, it's definitely
Really,
helpful. Yeah, helpful for sure, but we do have the customer success team that lives in the chief revenue officer's bucket. So it's like that matrix alignment between CRO, COO, overarching goals, and how we all kind of align to make them happen.
was that similar to what you experienced before? Like, what was kind of the structure that you were in before?
So at my last company and the company before that, both in CS Ops world, both of those actually had a chief customer officer in place. So customer success team and CS Ops all rolled up to that person. And I found that to be it was pretty easy to work in that environment considering we were all working toward the same goals all the time. There was never any competing priorities. Where in my current role, the CRO is not just responsible for customer success, but also the sales side of the house and the other go-to-market teams. So their priorities can range widely, and it can be harder for us to get key areas of focus and alignment. And then on the operations side, it's not just CS operations, it is go-to-market systems operations. So we have high-level goals that might not always correlate directly to customer success. They may lean more sales heavy, and then we're trying to scramble to figure out like what does that mean our priorities are on our focus area this quarter.
I don't want to dive in too deep into org structures. I'm sure that's not why, but why people really want to, or what people really want to hear. But what you're talking about, just to put a bow around this, like, I know a little bit about Matthew's career and as well, and like we've all experienced that, like where there's so much, like, one company you're on this structure and it's a little bit different, and then another company you're in a different structure, and then sometimes you wear the full hat of CS ops, sometimes you wear just a portion of it. I'm currently in a role where I just wear a portion of it too, like under the business system side, and it's quite a, you have to be a chameleon in this space, right? Like you've got to be able to sort of handle different org structures, different roles, and where your role maybe stops in one org might be a bit different in another org. So having to navigate that, like, and with Matthew, what Matthew was asking about in terms of you know what is it like, kind of this, join this new company, was it a challenge to be, is it a challenge to be that chameleon, or to be that sort of constant switching of where your role is and how you fit in?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I had I've kind of gone back and forth between the broader role in CS Ops doing a little bit of everything and the systems focus with my last four jobs. So I've been like back and forth, back and forth. And the first time I shifted from the CS Ops role into more of a CS systems role focused on just the systems piece, I definitely had a hard time adjusting. I think it was hard to let go of some of the things I may be aware of that work really well at my last company, and I want to operationalize it at my new company. But that doesn't fall in my wheelhouse. And as much as I could recommend it to somebody or ask them to look into it, it's not at the end of the day my decision. With this move, I've found it a lot easier to let go of that because we do have an entire team of people dedicated to it. They've been doing a great job with it. And I do feel that I'm able to still have those conversations and say, hey, I've done this before. Have we thought about this? And have it be something that's heard and respected. But it's we always say we can't boil the ocean, we can't do it all. It's really easy in an operations capacity to get overwhelmed with how much needs to be done. And so I found that specializing this time around has helped me to keep focused and to make more progress because I'm not letting myself get overwhelmed with all of the different possible things that could be improved.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that focus. I heard a CEO recently encourage his team of like, stop trying to do 20 things sort of well. Find three things and do them very, very well. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I like that prioritization thought in there.
Yeah, it's definitely it's hard. Prioritizing is always hard in any role because there's a million things happening and you have to pick the most important. But yeah, having a certain focus area narrows that scope and makes it easier to master your craft and from there, like learn how to prioritize appropriately.
What has your journey been, Jen, to this point? I know, okay, back and forth, and you've worn a lot of hats and had a lot of roles, which really just seasons you as you go along to be a key utility player and have a lot of perspective. But like, was your journey into and through really CS ops?
Yeah, I think I fell into CS ops specifically the same way a lot of people do, where someone had to do it at the company and nobody else had the time to do it. So um, at I just sort of fell into it because I found at a small startup that I worked for that I was someone who had the systems ability, and that's what we needed, systems and documentation, how-to documents, that kind of stuff. So I was working on a customer support team, to put it very, very like concisely, a customer support team. But my title was operations associate, as was the title of all my counterparts. Our team was balancing things like accounts receivable, working with our reseller and distributor partners, doing the customer support, doing the enterprise level customer success function, and some of the other like logistics and fulfillment operations. So we were wearing a lot of hats, all of us, and we got to a point where we were like, okay, we're gonna let some people that are specialized take those, accounts receivable responsibilities, logistics, and we're going to try to build a customer success team at this company. And when that decision was made, I was kind of like, I don't really want to be that strategic customer facing person. I see the value in it, but I don't know that that's for me. I really enjoy doing more of the day-to-day operations pieces, like the back end, the systems, the fulfillment, logistics operations, that kind of work. And fortunately enough, we needed someone to own Zendesk, our customer support ticketing system. So that is where I kind of started with systems. And once you get into one at a small company, they go, great, you know Zendesk, you're going to learn Salesforce and you're going to learn all these other things. Um, and so was very quickly able to like solidify myself as that person who can learn the systems, understands the customer facing aspect of what we're trying to achieve, and then can kind of bridge the two worlds of that customer facing like soft skills area with the technical skills for systems. And that's sort of how I got my start in customer success operations.
Yeah.
Um, I I didn't know what I wanted to do with my career out of college. I went to school for like business economics and I bounced around in roles for about 4 years before finding it. But once I got into operations, I was like, oh, I can do a little bit of everything and like help make a huge impact for our customers and our internal teams. So why would I not want to do that?
That's awesome. And have you since like added a bunch of different technologies to your to your tool belt? Like you said, Salesforce, and have there been others? I guess now Gainsight as well.
Yeah, yeah. So the first customer success platform I worked with was PlanHat, and that was at that company as well, smaller company. So we are using a different tool.
Yeah.
Um, so got into PlanHat, and when I started using PlanHat, the team there was like, here's all the competitor tools that put out great newsletters and great articles and information about CS ops and what we do. So the team over there was really wonderful with helping me like get exposure to Churn Zero and to Tango and all these other tools, but Gainsight has been my primary tool for the last couple of years. I also had like at that company where I was doing a little bit of everything. I had like a brief stint as a NetSuite administrator doing
Oh,
that for the
wow.
finance team. Yeah. Luckily we had a developer, so I didn't have to get like too in the weeds with it. But yeah, I did NetSuite. I've done, oh my God, Marketo, HubSpot, uh, just a whole bunch of everything in the go-to-market tech stack. I did Drift, Chili Piper, Outreach, SalesLoft, kind of all of the above. I think depending on where you land in an operations capacity, like a lot of our primary systems, whether it's Salesforce or a CRM on the sales side or a CSP on the customer success side, they all integrate very closely with one another, and you typically need data from one system in your system to like have a full picture of customer health or something like that. So I find that a lot of us get exposed to a ton of tools, even if
Mhm.
we're not the primary admin, like we learn a little bit about the architecture or how it works.
Yeah.
Have you found it
So,
difficult sorry, have you found it difficult to jump in like from one tool to another or?
So I my gauge for if I can learn a tool and my gauge for like as I've been on hiring panels for other people in similar roles is like if you can understand logic statements, if you can do it like an if formula or a VLOOKUP in Excel, you're going to be just fine learning a system. That's typically been my my rule of thumb, and it seems to have worked out well for myself and like engaging the ability of other people. Can you think through those logic statements? And if you can, you'll be fine.
love that. I still use feed lookup all the time. So I'm loving that. I have a slightly controversial question, which is, like we've got all the tools, they integrate, and then it seems like every single tool, all of them are claiming they are the one that gives you all of the information you need about your customer. Is this a real thing? Is there a real, I have a single source of truth about my customer? Or is it a unicorn that we're all just chasing around the SaaS forest right now? And it really just can't be done.
That's a big question. I think this is another one of those like isms from the ops world, but like I believe it can be done, but should it? That's kind of the question. Like you can do anything you want with a lot of the systems, specifically thinking about like a Salesforce or a Gainsight where they're maybe the key player in their space. They're very, very customizable. There's a lot of resources out there, whether it's documentation, videos that are like how-to videos, recorded webinars, a lot of information. There's a great Gainsight community that we're all a part of. Like you can utilize people there to kind of help think through things. You can probably do anything you want in a single system, but it requires a lot of over engineering of that system, thinking about if we wanted to put all of our product telemetry data into Salesforce, or we wanted to have a customer health score that we customize in Salesforce. The tool itself doesn't do that. So you do need some way to get it there. And typically that requires at least one more tool. But in terms of like the go-to-market team's tech stack, you could do it. But you run into a lot of issues with there's a million workflows now or a million API hookups to different data sources. And it's like if there's an issue somewhere or the data is incorrect, it's a lot harder to troubleshoot because it might be connected to several different places in that one tool. And it's very likely unsustainable. So at some of the smaller companies I've worked at or with, because I also have done some consulting for Salesforce and for Gainsight. At those companies, they will try to do it all, and at some point, everything starts breaking, and they realize we need something else. So I think you could if you really wanted to, but it's
Yeah,
not the best option.
I really like that. I really appreciate that answer, because I do feel like sometimes some of the vendors oversell, like, we're going to be your all in one. And I'm like, how does that work? And does it work? And or do you just spend, so to your point, spend so much time engineering it, building it, that you actually don't get the value that you had set out to attain?
Yeah, it does get a little bit more in the weeds with like a Salesforce or Gainsight when you consider the product suites. Even Zendesk has like a CRM and other options where they might not be the primary player in that space, but they do offer it. And so vendor consolidation, I feel like has been a huge thing, especially since the pandemic times and everyone trying to cut costs. So you could do more by using a single vendor, and hopefully those tools integrate a little bit better with one another. But at the end of the day, you're still, if you're doing that, buying multiple tools from one place. And even if they integrate well, it's still more than one tool. Yeah.
And so on with all that experience that you've had, you've played in with a lot of tools. Like why Gainsight? Why have you kind of settled in? I don't know how many years you've been doing Gainsight now, but it seems like you might have now you're focusing your career specifically about on Gainsight. What was the decision around that, or what kind of led you down that path?
I feel like, well, one thing that was really enticing to me about Gainsight was just the amount of support that's out there for Gainsight administrators. I've done a lot of work with Salesforce. I really like Trailhead. I like the community there. And seeing that Gainsight had very, very similar resources, I found that to be like a huge asset. And as someone who's self-taught most of the time, and if someone asks me to do something, I go, I think that's possible. And I start Googling furiously. Like having those resources is tremendous. But I've also, my first job ever was when I was like 14 years old. I started working at McDonald's, and customer support is something like customer service teaches you. So working in the customer realm where you've already made the sale, but you have to still like delight this person somehow, is something that's just kind of been ingrained in me in my work ethic. So I, when I was at that smaller startup and we had all the different tools and I got into ops and was kind of a jack of all trades for a little while doing NetSuite, Salesforce, Zendesk, whatever. Um, I got at some point the ability to kind of look at my career and say, do I want to go into sales operations? Do I want to go into marketing operations? Do I want to go into customer success operations? I don't think everyone's as lucky as I am, where you get to make that decision and like have a little bit of experience doing it all to actually make an informed decision. But for me, it was kind of a no-brainer. Like, why not support the team that is supporting our customers? Because at the end of the day, in terms of like the bulk of your business will come from your existing customers as long as they're happy with the service. So if I can help fix the things on the back end to make the customers feel like things are going real well and want to continue working with us or grow with us, that the impact that I can see immediately from that is like huge. Whereas in sales ops, depending on your function, because that world is so, so big. But if you're like really focused on like CPQ or territory management or like an area of sales ops, you don't always get to see the impact in real time, just depending on if it's a slow quarter or whatever the case. Whereas I feel like with CS, you're always seeing this escalation got, resolved quickly because of a workflow I built or something like that.
Yes, those instant gratifications are, or maybe they're not instant, but at least they're a little quicker in coming. I suppose in the CS problems, we would be like time to first value, and there's some version of that, like time to impact for CS ops, and
Right.
being able to be like, yeah, we put that integration in, or we set that process in motion, and got to see pretty immediate results. Got to be super gratifying.
Definitely.
Tell us a win or a fail, maybe that you've seen in your journey as we sort of wind down here in our conversation. Like, what's some project, and you can change the details to protect the innocent or the guilty, but like, what's something that was amazing, or what's something where you're like, yeah, that was a flop, but I learned from it.
I feel like one project that tends to be both for a lot of people is building your health score. And I've been lucky enough to help a couple of companies do that at this point. And actually, deal. We are this quarter going to start working on it. Literally, like tomorrow, I have my first kickoff meeting about it. So really excited to get back into it. But I think when you're thinking about wins or fails in operations, everything is very iterative. You build something expecting that it will need to change at some point. And when you think about a health score, they should be predictive, but maybe you don't have all the data you need to make the team proactive or to predict churn right now. So speaking about my last company as an example, we started building the health score and we had so much product telemetry data, but we didn't have as much around how we're actually, like in terms of the CSMs, engaging with our customers. We weren't capturing a ton of that data. So we were able to quickly add some great product metrics to our health score to show where certain areas of our product are highly used. So it's a great upsell opportunity, or where they're not really adopted as well or as, deeply as they should be, and escalate risk. And being able to do that is it's so powerful for CS teams who have never had that before. So I think in terms of wins, like that's something I'm very proud of doing for both of my last companies and soon to be here as well. Um, but you find, oh, well, we thought that this was the right threshold to trigger a risk or to trigger, an upsell opportunity or CTA. And you learn very quickly that that threshold's wrong. And so you have to go back to the drawing board and do some more analysis and figure out what does that actually look like. So while and health scores can be so robust, especially in Gainsight. So typically you have some things that are working super well out the gate and some things that are you maybe need to go back to the drawing board on. So I would say health scoring in general is like my one of my favorite things to do and also like greatest win and fail at different companies.
We may need you back in a quarter or so to hear the sanitized version of how it went, what you
Yeah,
learned, what went well and what didn't, because I
right.
know a lot
Yeah.
of people deal with that.
Yeah, we're starting small, like thinking about the DEAR framework, deployment, engagement, adoption, and ROI. We are starting with like deployment and engagement because we have that data. And the other two, we're going to have to look at a later date. So doing
On
kind of
later.
the crawl, walk, run approach and really starting with a crawl.
Yeah. Well, good luck. Good
Thank
luck.
you.
There's nobody here that's ever had any issues with health scoring at all. That's it's always a successful project everywhere.
Yeah, you always get it right the first time and it just works forever,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. It's yeah, it's like a crystal ball. Um, well, it's been super informative. Is there before we end the show here or end of the session, is there anything that you think that is going to like maybe you'd predict for the future or that you think will, as you've kind of you've had your experiences and you've been able to see a lot of different companies and how they work in CS, what any predictions for the future and where the world is going?
I think something we're already seeing happening in the like go-to-market space is customer success has been broken out at a lot of companies of all sizes as its own function. But as folks are continuing to try to, operationalize, find efficiencies, maybe cut costs, we're seeing a lot more folks going back to a standard account management model and cutting out customer success as a sole function and looping that function back in with sales, which has been really interesting. I think that model works very well in some industries or for certain size of business, but it's hard for me to understand how that works for like enterprise level customers that maybe need that extra nurture of a customer success manager. So kind of already seeing that happen. I've seen it more with smaller businesses, again, who are maybe a little more budget focused and less enterprise level. But it's going to be interesting to see how that develops as the economy maybe stabilizes and just continuing to keep an eye on that. I have a lot of friends who have been impacted by restructuring orgs in this space, and I do find that oftentimes with those restructures, operations is needed to help figure out how that's going to work, which is
Mhm.
great for, our industry in our field for the most part. But it's going to be interesting to see how customer success evolves to not go extinct with this change.
I think it's a really astute observation. And yes, yes to the ops, and yes to the we all know people who have been impacted. And it's part of what I love about this industry is I think we do a pretty good job rallying around people who need help or introductions or whatever. But I'm with you on well, there's a spotlight on CS ops and spotlight on CS really to say, okay, what's it gonna look like in 5 years? Is it gonna continue to be its own discipline, or will it have sort of attached itself to something else, or will it? Well, I don't know. Will the bots have taken over by then and put us all out of our misery? I don't know, but I'm curious to watch this one too, Jen.
Yeah, so it's an interesting point about the bots taking over too, because every time someone asks me, well, won't a robot be doing your job in a few years? I go, someone's got to run the robots. And so being on the systems side is the key to that,
Someone's
surviving that. Yeah.
Someone's got to run the robots. I think that is an excellent place to put a period in our conversation and walk away with that one. Jen, it's been so great to talk to you, to get insight into your universe. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Jen.
thank you guys both for having me. It's been really nice chatting.